The disabled alien princess entered the wrong room. Only the human asked her to stay. Towering spires of crystal and metal reflected the twin suns, and the gardens below shimmered with colors that humans could barely name. Every corner of the palace was filled with art, history, and power. But for Princess Lyra, it felt more like a maze than a home. Lyra, the youngest princess of Zythera, had been born with a disability that left her unable to walk. Her wheelchair, a sleek design of metal and levitation technology, carried her through the palace corridors. Even so, every day felt like a struggle. Many courtiers treated her with a mixture of pity and distance, as though her disability made her less capable of being the princess she was expected to be. Today was no different. The palace had invited delegates from many planets for a grand ceremony. Lyra was expected to attend, to smile, to represent her family, and to appear graceful. But inside, she felt nervous. Not just nervous, afraid. Afraid that she would make a mistake, that she would be judged, or that someone would see her as weak. The corridors were long and twisting, filled with statues and glowing signs. Lyra's mind raced as she maneuvered through the palace. She had memorized the map of the palace long ago, but even then, the endless passages sometimes seemed confusing. Today, she wanted nothing more than a quiet corner to collect herself before appearing in the grand hall. "Left or right?" she murmured to herself. Her fingers brushed the smooth controls on her wheelchair. She could glide silently, almost floating, but the corridors were crowded with attendants and visitors. Every step of the way, she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. At the end of one corridor, she noticed a door slightly ajar. It looked quiet, empty. Lyra sighed in relief. Perhaps she could rest here for a moment, gather her thoughts, and escape the feeling of everyone watching her. She wheeled forward and pushed the door open. Inside, she found herself in a room she did not recognize. It was smaller than the grand halls she was used to, filled with humans, beings from another planet. Humans were taller than many Zytherans, with lighter skin tones and curious expressions. Some were sitting at tables, some standing, and all of them froze the moment they saw her enter. Lyra froze as well. She had not expected to see humans here, not in this room. This was supposed to be a private lounge or meeting space, far from the main ceremony. She had made a mistake. The room seemed tense, filled with whispers and startled looks. I'm sorry," Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought this was—" "This isn't the wrong room," said a calm voice. It was not sharp or annoyed. It was curious and kind. Lyra looked up. A human was standing near the center of the room, a young man in a uniform with neat lines and medals. His expression was calm, and he gestured to a chair. "Please stay. You are welcome here." Lyra blinked. "I stay?" "Yes, you are welcome." "I'm Captain Ethan," he said, extending a hand. "Come, sit, talk with us." For a moment, Lyra hesitated. None of the other humans had said anything. Some looked uncomfortable. A few even turned away. But this one human, was smiling genuinely. No fear, no judgment, only invitation. Slowly, she moved her wheelchair into the room. She settled near Ethan, careful not to block anyone or seem intrusive. He nodded at her politely. "I'm glad you came. We rarely get visitors from your world in these spaces." Lyra felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had expected curiosity, suspicion, or even mockery. Instead, she found something she hadn't felt in a long time: acceptance. I didn't mean to intrude," she said softly. "I thought this was a lounge for the ceremony." "You are not intruding," Ethan replied. "You are welcome here. We can always use more perspectives. Please tell me about your world." Lyra blinked. No one had ever asked her to share her thoughts just because they wanted to hear them. Even within her own palace, many assumed she knew nothing beyond what a princess should know. And yet here was someone, an outsider, a human, inviting her to speak. She took a deep breath. "Zythera is complicated," she began. "Our palace is huge, our society has rules for everything, and sometimes it feels like no one truly sees me for who I am." Ethan listened, nodding. "I understand. Humans have rules too, but I think it's different. We try to adapt, to learn from each other." Lyra was surprised. You listen?" "I do," he said simply, "and I want to." For the first time in her life, Lyra spoke freely. She told him about the corridors of the palace, the expectations, the endless ceremonies, and the whispers behind her back. She spoke about her wheelchair, about how it made her feel different from her siblings and cousins, about the loneliness of being a princess who was supposed to be perfect. Ethan didn't interrupt. He only asked questions gently, encouraging her to share more. His curiosity was not judgmental. It was human, open, and kind. Meanwhile, the other humans in the room began to notice. Some glanced at her with confusion, unsure how to react. Others watched silently, sensing that this exchange was unusual, but none of them interfered. Lyra felt something she had never felt before in the presence of strangers: comfort. She laughed softly at some of Ethan's observations about human life, and he smiled, sharing small stories of Earth and their technology. They were different in every way, yet somehow their minds connected. After some time, one of the humans cleared their throat, looking impatient. "Princess, I think this is not the correct meeting." Ethan shook his head. "Let her stay, she is welcome." Lyra's heart swelled. No one in her own palace would have said that so firmly. Here, on this foreign planet, a human had given her something she had not expected: respect. Hours seemed to pass in a short moment. Lyra shared stories of Zithara's history, and Ethan spoke of human exploration, of planets visited and challenges faced. They found similarities in their struggles: the pressure to perform, the need to prove themselves, the desire to be seen as more than appearances. At one point, Lyra paused and looked at Ethan carefully. Why do you care so much?" Ethan smiled softly. "Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. I want to see people for who they are, not for what they are supposed to be." Lyra felt a tear threaten to fall. She quickly blinked it away. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She realized in that moment that she had found someone she could trust, someone who truly wanted to understand. Soon, the room grew quieter as the ceremony outside began. Some humans had left, returning to their duties, but Ethan stayed. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said gently. "Stay a little longer, talk with me." Lyra looked around the room at the empty chairs and silent humans. For the first time, she didn't feel like an intruder. She felt like she belonged. Slowly, she nodded. I'll stay." And with that, the princess who had entered the wrong room by accident had found a place where she was seen, heard, and valued. Not as a princess, not as an alien, not as someone with a disability, but as Lyra herself. The palace outside could remain grand and intimidating. The corridors could twist and turn, full of expectations and rules. But here, in this small human room, Lyra felt something she had never felt before: freedom. Ethan smiled at her, not as a ruler or a visitor, but as a friend. And for Lyra, that small moment of acceptance was more powerful than any ceremony or celebration the palace could offer. For the first time, she realized that perhaps making a mistake, entering the wrong room, was exactly what she needed. The next morning, Princess Lyra woke early. The sunlight streamed through the tall crystal windows of her room, casting patterns on the smooth floor. Despite the beauty of the palace, she felt restless. The events of the previous day replayed in her mind: the unexpected entrance into the human delegation room, the nervous glances, and most importantly, the kind words of Captain Ethan. She wondered why one human could be so different from the rest. While others had been distant or cautious, Ethan had listened. He had treated her as a person, not a princess or an alien with a disability. That small act of respect had given her courage. Today, she decided, she would find him again. The palace corridors were busy with attendants, diplomats, and robots carrying trays of food and documents. Lyra maneuvered her wheelchair smoothly, careful to avoid collisions. She knew the layout better now, thanks to the many hours spent learning every passage and hidden path of her home. Her fingers brushed the controls lightly, steering herself toward the human delegation wing. When she arrived, the room was quieter than yesterday. Some humans were preparing for meetings with other delegates, while others studied documents on floating holograms. She spotted Ethan near a large table, examining a holographic map of the planet. His expression was focused but calm, as though he could see problems and solutions at the same time. "Good morning," Lyra said softly as she approached. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Princess Lyra, I didn't expect to see you so early, but I'm glad you came." Lyra returned his smile, though it was shy. "I wanted to learn more. You said I could ask questions." "Of course," Ethan said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Sit, there's a lot to discuss." Lyra rolled herself to the chair, feeling the smooth floor beneath her wheels. She marveled at how comfortable humans seemed in their spaces. Their rooms were practical, without the grandeur and intimidation of her own palace, yet everything was perfectly organized. I want to understand your world," she said. "I've never met humans before." "I know stories, of course, but it's not the same." Ethan nodded. Stories are only words. To truly understand, you need to see, hear, and experience. I can tell you about humans, our history, our problems, and our achievements. But more importantly, I can answer your questions. Lyra felt a spark of excitement. Questions had always been dangerous for her at the palace. Asking too much could be seen as ignorance or defiance. But here, in this human room, questions were welcome. "Do humans fight often?" she asked cautiously. "I've heard stories about wars and conflicts," Ethan sighed. "Yes, we have fought, but not all humans fight. Most of us want to build, explore, and learn. Conflict happens when people cannot solve their problems peacefully. But humans have also invented incredible things, spaceships, medicines, energy systems that help life flourish." Lyra listened closely, fascinated. "On Zithra, we have advanced technology too," she said. "But sometimes we focus so much on rules and appearances that we forget what people truly need." "That is a problem everywhere," Ethan said gently. "Rules are important, but people must come first. Otherwise, systems fail." Lyra nodded slowly, thinking about her own palace. So many people followed the rules, yet no one truly saw her struggles. No one had asked what she wanted. No one had listened. "I feel different," Lyra admitted. "Because of my disability, I often feel left out, even in my own home." Ethan looked at her kindly. "You are not different in a bad way. You see the world differently, and that is valuable. Perspective is power." Lyra blinked, surprised. She had never thought of her disability as a source of strength before. Usually it was something that made her feel small. But Ethan's words made her feel important. They spoke for hours. Ethan told her about human exploration, about planets beyond Zithra, about challenges humans faced and overcame. Lyra shared stories of her childhood, of the palace ceremonies, and of the weight of expectations placed upon her. "You know," Ethan said at one point, "humans often admire perseverance. We try to do what seems impossible, even when the odds are against us. I see that in you." Lyra looked down, unsure. I never thought anyone would notice." "I notice," he said simply, "and I think it matters." The conversation was interrupted by a loud chime. One of the humans in the room frowned, glancing at a holographic display. "Princess Lyra, there seems to be a minor security alert in the palace," the human said. "Nothing critical yet, but sensors indicate unusual activity near the outer corridors." Lyra's heart quickened. In the palace, a security alert could mean anything, from a malfunctioning robot to a serious threat. I should return," she said. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You should stay," Ethan said firmly. "You can help me think. Humans and Zitherans together are stronger." Lyra hesitated but realized he was right. Her knowledge of the palace could be useful, and her mind was clear and sharp. She nodded. "All right, I'll help." Ethan smiled. "Good, let's start." They worked together, studying the security readouts and maps of the palace corridors. Lyra pointed out hidden passages and secret exits that only a princess would know. Ethan combined that knowledge with human logic and problem-solving methods. Slowly, they began to understand the situation. "It doesn't seem like an attack," Lyra said finally. "But someone or something is testing the system. They want to see how we respond." "That could be dangerous if we don't act quickly," Ethan said. "But your insight is incredible. I wouldn't have noticed these patterns without you." Lyra felt a sense of pride. For the first time, her presence was not a burden. It was an advantage. Together, they created a plan to monitor the corridors and protect the palace. As they worked, other humans began to observe them. Some whispered, wondering why the princess was so involved. Others smiled, seeing the unusual teamwork. No one interfered because it was clear that Lyra and Ethan were a team. After a long session, the alert ended. It had been a test by the palace security system designed to simulate emergencies. Lyra's knowledge and Ethan's strategy had successfully neutralized the threat before it escalated. "You did wonderfully," Ethan said, turning to her with a bright smile. "I knew you could handle it." Lyra felt warmth rise in her chest. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "Your perspective, it's different. It helps me see solutions I wouldn't have considered." "That's why we make good partners," Ethan said simply. "Humans think differently, Zitherans think differently. Together, we cover more ground." Lyra nodded. She realized that humans' creativity and courage complemented her own strategic mind. She began to see that differences were not weaknesses, they were strengths if used together. They spent the rest of the day exploring ideas for improving palace procedures and accessibility. Lyra suggested modifications to corridors and control systems, and Ethan added ideas from human engineering. Their collaboration sparked excitement in both of them, and soon, even other humans began to contribute. For the first time, Lyra felt truly included. She wasn't being judged for her disability or for being a princess. She was valued for her mind, her insight, and her courage. As evening approached, Lyra finally returned to her quarters. She was exhausted but happy. She thought about the palace, the ceremony, and the humans she had met. She realized that meeting Ethan had changed everything. She felt inspired, not only to be a better princess, but to think beyond her limitations, to find ways to make her world better. That night, she reflected on the day's lessons. Trust could bridge worlds. Differences were strengths, not weaknesses. Genuine kindness could transform fear into courage. Princess Lyra had entered the human room by accident, but staying had been a choice, and a choice that might change her life forever. And somewhere across the palace, Captain Ethan reviewed the day's events. He thought about the princess who had entered the wrong room. Unlike other delegates, she had ideas, insights, and courage. More than that, she had the willingness to learn and adapt. He knew that if humans and Zitherans worked together, great things could be accomplished. Little did they know, their growing friendship would soon face challenges. Threats to the palace, rivals who doubted Lyra's abilities, and tests that would require both human ingenuity and Zitharan strategy. But for now, in the quiet evening of Zithara, two minds from different worlds had found a connection. A connection that promised not only friendship, but the power to change the future. And Princess Lyra, for the first time, felt that she was not alone. The morning sun rose over the palace of Zithara, its golden light reflecting off the towering spires and painting the gardens below in colors that shifted with the breeze. Princess Lyra, seated in her sleek wheelchair, looked out of her window. The calm beauty of the palace betrayed nothing of the tension that would soon unfold. Lyra had barely finished breakfast when an urgent chime echoed through her quarters. Her personal assistant, a small hovering robot, projected a holographic alert. "Princess Lyra," it said in a neutral tone, "a critical system malfunction has been detected in the palace's central security grid. Immediate attention is required." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had seen minor alerts before, false alarms triggered by a miscalibrated sensor or a lost robot. But this was different. The alert indicated that multiple systems were offline: surveillance, communication, and automated defenses. In short, the palace was vulnerable. Without hesitation, she wheeled herself to the human delegation wing, where Captain Ethan was already reviewing updates on a large holographic screen. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but urgent, "there's a major system failure. I think the palace could be at risk." Ethan's expression shifted instantly from focus to concern. "Show me the data," he said, pulling up a projection of the palace's grid. Red lines indicated inactive systems. "This is serious. Someone or something has bypassed multiple security layers." Lyra scanned the grid carefully. "It doesn't look like a random malfunction. These patterns, they're deliberate. Someone is testing the palace's defenses." Ethan nodded. "Agreed, but we need to act quickly. Do you know the layout well enough to help me locate weak points?" Lyra hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I know every hidden corridor, every service hatch, every maintenance passage. If we combine that with your human strategies, we can prevent any real damage." Together, they began to organize a response. Lyra suggested which corridors to monitor, which rooms to prioritize, and where the palace staff might need extra guidance. Ethan applied human problem-solving methods, creating efficient teams and assigning clear tasks. "Your wheelchair may limit movement in tight spaces," Ethan said thoughtfully, "but your knowledge of the palace makes you indispensable. We can work as a team." Lyra smiled. "Then let's get to work." They moved quickly through the palace, Lyra guiding security teams and Ethan coordinating human and alien volunteers. The atmosphere was tense. Palace guards hurried along corridors, their antennae twitching with worry, while hovering drones scanned every room for anomalies. Yet Lyra remained composed, her mind sharp despite the chaos. As they reached the central control hub, Lyra noticed something strange. A set of maintenance panels had been tampered with, but no one had entered the area. "Look," she said, pointing. "These panels were accessed remotely. Whoever is behind this knows the palace systems intimately. They could be someone from within." Ethan frowned. "Internal threats are the hardest to detect, but your insight helps narrow it down. Let's secure these areas first." Working together, they managed to reroute power and restore some of the palace's security functions. Lyra directed teams to repair the maintenance nodes while Ethan organized patrols and contingency plans. Despite their progress, the palace remained tense. Alarms occasionally rang, and whispers of fear spread among the staff. Lyra's presence, however, brought calm. She spoke firmly and clearly, giving instructions without hesitation. Her wheelchair, once a symbol of limitation in her eyes, became a tool of leadership. She moved smoothly from team to team, evaluating, advising, and encouraging. Hours passed in a blur of activity. By midday, most of the critical systems were restored, but one major problem remained. The palace's central energy core, which powered all automated defenses, was unstable. If it failed, the entire palace could be vulnerable to real danger. Lyra and Ethan studied the data together. "The core is delicate," Lyra said, "and someone has triggered a chain reaction that could overload it. We need to stabilize it manually." Ethan's eyes widened. "That's dangerous, but with your knowledge, we might have a chance." Lyra nodded. "We have to try." They reached the energy core chamber, a massive room filled with humming machinery and glowing conduits. The floor vibrated slightly under their feet, or in Lyra's case, under her wheelchair. "Follow my lead," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I know the access points." Ethan watched in admiration as Lyra maneuvered her wheelchair expertly through tight spaces, guiding him where to place stabilizers and how to adjust the energy flow. Her hands moved quickly across panels, her fingers pressing sequences with precision. "You're incredible," Ethan said quietly. Lyra smiled briefly but remained focused. "We don't have time for compliments. The core must be stabilized now." Working together, they rerouted power, balanced the energy flow, and engaged emergency protocols. Slowly, the vibrations subsided and the core hummed steadily. "We did it," Ethan said, exhaling with relief. Lyra nodded, but her eyes scanned the room. "For now," she said, "but whoever did this knows the palace well. They may try again." Before Ethan could respond, a holographic alert appeared, showing movement in the palace gardens. Two figures in shadow were approaching the main gates, bypassing several security checkpoints. "More intruders," Ethan said, concerned. "We need to intercept them." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "No, we need to think first. Rushing in could trigger another failure. Let's use strategy." Together, they deployed a team of human and Zitharan guards along hidden routes. Lyra suggested using the maintenance corridors to flank the intruders while Ethan coordinated a distraction at the gates. The plan worked perfectly. The intruders were intercepted without harm, and their purpose revealed. They were minor operatives from a rival faction, sent to test the palace's defenses and gather information. Lyra's heart raced. The palace was safe for now, but the incident confirmed her fears. She was surrounded by rivals who doubted her abilities. Yet, as she looked at Ethan, she felt a renewed confidence. With his guidance and her knowledge, they could face any challenge. Later, as the palace returned to a semblance of calm, Lyra reflected on the day's events. She realized several important things. Her disability did not prevent her from leading or solving problems. Collaboration between humans and Zitharans could overcome obstacles that neither could handle alone. Trust and communication were more powerful than fear and caution. Ethan approached her as she wheeled through the quiet corridors. "You were amazing today," he said sincerely. "I've seen leaders, but you inspire everyone to act. You show them what's possible." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and humility. "I didn't do it alone. You helped me see solutions I wouldn't have considered. Together, we made the palace safe." "That's the point," Ethan said. "Teamwork, human ingenuity combined with your insight, that's unstoppable." Lyra felt a strange warmth at his words. She realized that this human, someone from a completely different world, saw her not as a princess, not as someone disabled, but as a capable and clever individual. As evening approached, Lyra returned to her quarters. The palace was quiet now, the tension replaced by relief. She wheeled herself to the window and gazed at the twin suns setting behind the distant mountains. Her heart was full of thoughts. She had survived a real crisis. She had helped prevent danger, and she had done it in collaboration with someone entirely different from herself. For the first time, she felt truly confident in her abilities, not because others praised her, but because she had proven to herself that she could lead, solve problems, and make a difference. That night, Lyra thought about the palace, the humans, and the challenges ahead. She knew that this crisis was only the beginning. Rival factions would not stop, palace intrigue would continue and new threats could emerge at any time. But she was no longer afraid. She had learned that courage came not from strength alone, but from knowledge, strategy, and trust. And she had found someone she could trust, Captain Ethan, the human who had asked her to stay in the wrong room, who had seen her for who she truly was, and who had now proven to be an invaluable ally. As she drifted into sleep, Lyra smiled faintly. The palace, with all its rules and expectations, suddenly felt less like a trap and more like a place she could navigate, on her own terms, with her mind and her heart leading the way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and perhaps new allies. But for now, Princess Lyra rested with the knowledge that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, and that human ingenuity, combined with her insight, could achieve remarkable things. For the first time in her life, she felt not like a princess confined by walls, but like a leader capable of shaping the future, of Zithra, and perhaps even beyond. The next morning, the palace of Zithra was unusually quiet. Usually, the corridors buzzed with attendants and officials preparing for the day's ceremonies, but today, a tense atmosphere lingered. Word had spread about the previous day's crisis, and while the palace was safe, whispers of suspicion and fear floated through every hall. Princess Lyra rolled herself through the corridors, her mind focused. The events of the crisis still weighed on her, not with fear, but with a sense of responsibility. She knew that surviving a system failure was only the beginning. Rivals within the palace had watched carefully, and some had already begun plotting their next move. Lyra reached the human delegation room, where Captain Ethan was reviewing a holographic map of the palace. His expression was serious though calm, a contrast to the tense whispers outside. "Good morning, Lyra," he said, nodding as she approached. "I've been reviewing yesterday's events. The rival faction is not done. They're planning something bigger, something more direct." Lyra frowned. "Direct? You mean an open challenge?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, they want to undermine your leadership. They want to make it clear that a princess who relies on a human cannot rule effectively, and they have the resources to try." Lyra's heart beat faster, but she took a deep breath. "Then we have to be ready. I won't let them succeed, Ethan, not if I can prevent it." Ethan smiled faintly. "Good, that's the spirit." By mid-morning, the palace was abuzz with activity. The rival faction, a group of high-ranking officials and nobles, had called a formal challenge meeting in the Grand Council Hall. The room was filled with palace officials, delegates from other planets, and an audience of observers. Lyra and Ethan entered together. Lyra's wheelchair glided smoothly across the polished floor, and Ethan walked beside her, offering support and strategy if needed. The leader of the rival faction, a tall Zitharan noble named Varian, stood at the center of the hall. His eyes narrowed as he saw Lyra enter. "Princess Lyra," he said in a voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, "yesterday's events have proven one thing: you are unprepared to lead without constant guidance. And worse, you rely on an outsider, one of the humans, to make critical decisions for you. How can you expect to rule when you cannot even manage your palace independently?" Whispers spread through the room. Some officials nodded, agreeing silently with Varian. Others looked uncertain, waiting to see how Lyra would respond. Lyra's hands rested lightly on the controls of her wheelchair. She felt the familiar mix of fear and determination, but this time, fear did not dominate. She looked directly at Varian and spoke clearly. "You are mistaken," she said. "Yesterday, I led the response to a critical security failure. I identified the threats, directed the palace teams, and made decisions that prevented serious harm. Captain Ethan assisted, yes, but he did not lead. I did. And I will continue to lead, using every tool, every ally, and every insight available." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Many had expected Lyra to falter, to hesitate, or to show weakness. Instead, she spoke with confidence and clarity. Varian's face twisted with anger. "Confidence alone does not make a ruler, princess. Your wheelchair limits you physically, and reliance on humans shows your vulnerability. How can the palace trust you to defend it against real threats?" Lyra's gaze hardened. "My wheelchair does not limit my mind. My ability to lead is not measured by how fast I can move, but by how well I can think, plan, and act. And as for humans, their perspective has proven invaluable. Collaboration does not weaken leadership, it strengthens it." Ethan stepped forward, standing beside her. "She is right. Humans and Zitharans together create solutions that neither could achieve alone. Yesterday proved that." The hall fell silent. Varian scowled, realizing that words alone would not discredit Lyra. He had underestimated her strength, her intelligence, and her ability to inspire others. Lyra continued, I will not allow fear, prejudice, or narrow thinking to dictate the safety of this palace. If you wish to challenge me, let it be based on strategy, ideas, and results, not assumptions and outdated notions of power. Varian's eyes narrowed. Very well, Princess. If it is a test you want, it is a test you shall have. That afternoon, a simulated crisis was staged as part of the formal challenge. An isolated section of the palace was subjected to controlled system failures, creating obstacles and potential dangers. The rival faction intended to observe how Lyra would respond and hoped she would falter under pressure. Lyra and Ethan quickly assessed the situation. We must act fast, Lyra said, examining the holographic display of the affected areas. The intruders, or obstacles, are testing multiple points simultaneously. We need to stabilize key systems and coordinate our team strategically. Ethan nodded. Agreed. Let's split our focus. Your knowledge of the palace will guide the teams, while I coordinate the resources and human tactics. Lyra wheeled herself swiftly through the corridors, issuing clear instructions to palace teams. She directed maintenance droids to repair damaged systems, guided security units to block potential threats, and coordinated evacuations for the areas at risk. At the same time, Ethan implemented human strategies. He created rapid communication channels, assigned roles based on skill sets, and introduced innovative solutions that Zitharans had not considered. The rival faction watched closely, expecting errors or hesitation. But Lyra's calm and decisive leadership, combined with Ethan's tactical insight, proved unstoppable. Each obstacle was overcome with precision, each threat neutralized without harm. By evening, the challenge had concluded. The simulated crisis was fully resolved, and the palace remained secure. Observers whispered in admiration. Officials who had doubted Lyra's ability now nodded respectfully. Even some of Varian's supporters looked uncertain, impressed by her skill. Lyra returned to the Grand Council Hall, facing Varian once again. The palace is safe, she said simply. The challenge is complete. The results speak for themselves. Varian's face flushed with anger, but he found no words. He had attempted to undermine her through doubt and intimidation, but she had responded with competence, intelligence, and courage. His attempt had failed. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Lyra's shoulder. You did it. You proved them wrong without ever compromising your values. Lyra smiled faintly. It wasn't just me. We did it together. That is the real strength, understanding that collaboration, strategy, and insight are more powerful than fear and prejudice. The crowd in the hall erupted in applause. Officials and delegates recognized the leadership of Princess Lyra. They had witnessed not only her intellect, but her courage in standing firm against doubt and challenge. That night, as the palace grew quiet, Lyra reflected on the day's events. She realized how far she had come. She had faced open opposition and intimidation, yet she had remained calm and decisive. Her disability had not prevented her from leading. It had sharpened her focus and perspective. Collaboration with humans had strengthened her leadership rather than weakened it. Her courage and intelligence had earned the respect of allies and observers alike. Lyra wheeled herself to her quarters and gazed out at the star-filled sky. The twin suns had set, leaving a calm, shimmering night. For the first time, she felt truly capable, not because of her title, not because of tradition, but because she had proven her skill, insight, and courage in action. Ethan entered quietly, carrying a small tray with refreshments. You deserve a moment of rest, he said gently. Lyra shook her head. Rest will come later. Tonight I want to think about what we achieved and what still needs to be done. This palace, this kingdom, it has potential, and I want to ensure it is used wisely. You already are, Ethan said with a smile. You've changed the way people see leadership, not just here, but in how humans and Zitharans can work together. Lyra considered his words. She realized that leadership was not about showing strength alone or hiding vulnerability. It was about insight, courage, collaboration, and the willingness to learn from others, even from those who seemed very different. As they sat quietly, looking out over the palace gardens, Lyra felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. She knew challenges would continue. Rivals would not stop, threats would arise, and difficult decisions would need to be made. But she was ready. For the first time, Princess Lyra felt that she could not only survive in her palace but also lead it to greatness. Using every strength she had, every insight she could gather, and every ally willing to stand with her. And in that quiet night, she realized something more. Sometimes the greatest power comes not from strength or skill alone, but from trust, respect, and the courage to act wisely in the face of doubt. Tomorrow, new challenges would come, but Lyra was no longer afraid. She had faced opposition, survived a simulated crisis, and proven herself capable of leadership beyond expectations. With Ethan by her side, she knew that no obstacle was too great. Together, they could face anything, whether from within the palace or beyond its walls. And for the first time, Princess Lyra felt fully seen, fully capable, and fully ready to shape the future of Zithara. The palace of Zithara was alive with activity the next morning, but there was a difference. The nervous energy that had filled the halls for weeks was replaced with a cautious optimism. The rival faction, humiliated by their failed attempt to challenge Princess Lyra, had retreated for now, but whispers of doubt still lingered among some officials. Lyra knew that leadership was not only about action, it was also about inspiration and trust. Princess Lyra wheeled herself through the corridors, her mind focused and her heart steady. She had learned much over the past days: how to handle crisis, how to lead with clarity, and how to combine her knowledge with Ethan's human ingenuity. Today, she planned to ensure that the palace and her people understood the importance of unity and collaboration. She arrived at the human delegation room where Captain Ethan was already reviewing reports from the previous day's council meetings. "Good morning," he said, smiling. "You look ready for a big day." Lyra returned the smile. "I am. Today is about more than defending myself. It's about showing the palace what we can accomplish when we work together." Ethan nodded. "Then let's get started." Lyra wheeled herself through the main hall where delegates from many planets had gathered. Her presence commanded attention, not because of her title, but because of her calm confidence. She paused at the center of the hall and addressed the assembly. "Friends, colleagues, and allies," she began, her voice steady. "The past days have shown us that challenges will come, some expected, some not. But our response shows what is possible when we combine our knowledge, our insight, and our courage. Leadership is not about power alone. It is about understanding, collaboration, and the willingness to act wisely." A murmur of approval spread through the room. Some delegates, previously skeptical, now listened with respect. Lyra continued, "We have a choice. We can cling to old rules and divisions, or we can embrace new perspectives, learn from one another, and work together for the benefit of all. I choose the latter, and I ask each of you to do the same." Ethan, standing beside her, felt a swell of pride. Lyra's words were not just about leadership. They were about a vision for the future, a future where humans and Zitharans could work together to achieve more than either could alone. After her speech, Lyra turned her attention to practical matters. She moved through the palace, speaking with teams of humans and Zitharans, listening to concerns and offering guidance. She suggested changes to the palace systems to make them more efficient and accessible. She advised on security protocols, showing how collaboration could prevent threats before they even arose. Ethan followed closely, offering input where needed but always letting Lyra lead. He knew that her insight and knowledge of the palace were invaluable. He admired the way she balanced authority with approachability, showing strength without arrogance. Meanwhile, the rival faction watched from a distance. Varian, their leader, frowned as he saw Lyra moving confidently among the teams, issuing instructions and earning respect. His plan to undermine her had failed spectacularly. For the first time, he realized that Lyra's strength was not only in her mind, but also in her courage, resilience, and ability to inspire loyalty. By midday, the palace had undergone several changes. Corridors were reorganized for better accessibility, security systems were improved, and communication channels were streamlined. Lyra had also introduced collaborative teams, pairing humans and Zitharans to solve problems together. As she wheeled herself into the human delegation room for a brief rest, Ethan approached. "You've done more than I imagined," he said. "The palace is changing because of you." Lyra shook her head. "It's not just me, we did this together. Humans and Zitharans, when we listen, learn, and act together, we can achieve remarkable things." Ethan smiled. "You're right, but your leadership is what makes it all possible. Your vision, your courage, and your willingness to act, that inspires everyone." Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest. She realized that her disability, once a source of self-doubt, had not held her back. Instead, it had shaped her perspective, helped her notice details others overlooked, and given her the patience and focus needed to lead effectively. Later that evening, Lyra received a personal message from the Council of Elders. They formally recognized her leadership and praised her efforts in uniting humans and Zitharans during the crisis. They acknowledged her bravery, her intelligence, and her ability to inspire others. Lyra smiled as she read the message. Recognition was not her goal, it was the result of doing what was right. She had faced challenges, proven her abilities, and helped others see the value of collaboration and inclusion. That night, she wheeled herself to the palace gardens. The twin suns had set, and the stars reflected off the palace's crystal towers. The gardens were quiet, filled with soft lights and the gentle hum of energy systems keeping plants alive. Ethan joined her, carrying a small tray with refreshments. "You deserve a moment of peace," he said. Lyra looked at him and smiled. "Peace is nice, but reflection is better. Today showed me that leadership is more than rules or appearances. It's about listening, understanding, and acting wisely." "And that is something I will never forget," Ethan nodded. "And you've reminded me too, humans can learn a lot from different worlds, just as Zitharans can learn from us." They sat together in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Lyra realized how far she had come, from the princess who entered the wrong room by accident to a leader who had earned the respect of her people, and forged a bond with humans that would last far beyond this crisis. "I think the palace is ready for more than just safety," Lyra said softly. "It's ready for change, for inclusion, for collaboration, for a future where differences are strengths." Ethan smiled. "And you're the one leading it." Lyra laughed softly. "Perhaps, but I am not alone." That is the most important part. The days that followed saw more changes in the palace. Accessibility was improved, teams worked together more efficiently, and human-Zitharan collaborations became a model for diplomacy across planets. Lyra's leadership inspired others to rethink assumptions about strength, ability, and leadership. Even the rival faction adapted. Varian, once skeptical and bitter, began to understand that leadership was not about fear or control. Watching Lyra, he realized that courage, intelligence, and collaboration were far more powerful than intimidation. Slowly, he began to cooperate, contributing his knowledge while respecting her guidance. Lyra's friendship with Ethan deepened as well. They spent time sharing stories, strategies, and ideas for improving not only the palace, but also the relationship between humans and Zitharans. Their bond was not romantic. It was built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared vision for a better future. One afternoon, as they wheeled through the palace corridors together, Lyra stopped near a small lounge. She looked at Ethan with a smile. "Do you remember the first time I entered this room by mistake?" Ethan laughed softly. "How could I forget? You were nervous, unsure, and yet somehow completely sure that you belonged. That was the moment I realized you would do great things." Lyra smiled. "I stayed, and I learned that mistakes can lead to new beginnings. That day changed everything for me." Ethan nodded. "It changed things for me too. It reminded me that sometimes the most important moments come when we least expect them." As evening fell, the palace lights reflected on the gardens like a sea of stars. Lyra wheeled herself to a vantage point overlooking the main courtyard. She watched as humans and Zitharans moved together, carrying out their duties efficiently and respectfully. The palace was no longer a place of fear or division. It was a place of collaboration and growth. Lyra knew challenges would continue to come. New crises, political intrigue, and tests of leadership would arise. But she also knew that she was ready. She had learned to trust herself, to value collaboration, and to act with courage and intelligence. And she had learned that leadership was not about perfection. It was about resilience, empathy, and the willingness to see the potential in others and in oneself. As she watched the stars twinkle above, Lyra felt a sense of hope stronger than ever. She had entered the wrong room by accident, but that mistake had led her to something far greater: friendship, trust, and the realization that she could shape the future of Zithara with courage, intelligence, and collaboration. Captain Ethan joined her quietly, offering a hand. Lyra accepted it, smiling. Together, they watched the palace below, a symbol of strength, unity, and the promise of a new beginning. Princess Lyra knew that this was only the start, but for the first time she felt that she was truly ready for whatever the future held. And in that moment, under the twin moons of Zithra, she realized something more. Mistakes could lead to discovery, differences could lead to strength, and collaboration could create a future brighter than anyone had imagined. The princess who had entered the wrong room had not only found acceptance, she had found purpose, courage, and the power to lead her people toward a better tomorrow. The palace of Zithra would never be the same again, and neither would she.